First, I have to tell everyone that I'm a nervous speaker. You know, I'm nervous when I get up in front of a group of people, and it's actually harder doing it teleconferencing because I can't draw on the energy of the audience. And so, just so you know, I'm nervous. I'm also, as you heard, from Nebraska, Omaha, grown and raised. Grade school, high school, Nebraska Methodist School of Nursing. Omaha's home, Nebraska's home. So it's nice to be talking with everyone. All right, so here's what we're going to do, being nervous that I am. I have my notes here and I pulled them out. And what was interesting to me is that in reading over them, I thought, these don't apply anymore. The virus, the pandemic has changed our lives so much that we have to invent new guidelines, new ways of providing care. So where I would normally start off talking about CAP scores, I kind of smiled because really, at this point, do we even think about those? You know, we're thinking about how do we even get in the door, let alone how do we get a family to write good survey scores for us. So I'm going to talk about care that we can provide in today's unusual environment, because I don't see it changing too much in the next few months. There may be opening up more, but the fear is still there. The fear that we walk with every day. All of us, no matter our age or actually how much we're willing to admit that we're afraid. Add to that being a senior, and then a senior, frail senior in questionable health, and you've got a tremendous amount of fear that we're working with. So 90% of our work is still education, but we're going to have to provide that education in a different manner. And that's where I come in. All right. Taking care of someone at end of life is different than taking care of someone who's going to get better. You and I know that, but most people don't. And unless we teach people otherwise, our work will be judged on how people get better. And we know that's not end-of-life care. So 90% of our work is education to teach families that how their loved one is going to approach the end of their life will be different. You know, most of us, if we're at the bedside of someone who's dying, we bring the role model of television and the movies. Most of us have not been, when I say us, I mean families, have not been at the bedside when someone is dying. And so they view that experience as pathological, as something bad and abnormal is happening, where our job is to teach that family before the hour or minutes before death, before that time, in the weeks, in the months before death. Our obligation is to teach the family what normal dying is like and what's going to happen. In order for us as agencies to do that, we all have to be on the same page. We all have to provide a continuity of care. And that begins with what we're teaching to the families, what our goal and our teaching about end of life, of how death happens, of what is normal and what is not. All of us in an agency have to be on the same page, and that isn't always the case. As Connie said, I've been the director of a couple of different hospices in Kansas City, and what I have done over the years, starting with when I was a staff nurse, but actually as a director, I have created materials and a method of teaching, a program of teaching that I think meets the needs of the families and the patients in end of life. So based on that, I will share with you how I see educating families at end of life. Now, my PowerPoint, I threw it out. So I'm gonna do stuff like this, and this will be as close to a PowerPoint as I get. I used to give workshops around the country. Have done it for years. Finally stopped because I got too old actually to do all the traveling. But I put together a 3-hour DVD on the last workshop I did. We filmed it, we edited it, and it's how people die. It talks about and provides the foundation for end-of-life knowledge. 3 hours, you go, oh, Barbara, that's way too long. We can't do that. Under normal circumstances, what you would do is probably, it's broken into parts 1, 2, and 3. And so each part is about an hour, and you have an in-service on Friday, 3 Fridays in a row. And you watch an hour's worth, and then you talk about it. So, and that's everyone, including the receptionist. Everyone in the office watches this and talks about it. Now, that's great when everything was fine and normal. Now it's not. And so we're not getting together, and I'm guessing there isn't a lot of in-servicing going on. So you can go to Vimeo, you can go online, you can call our office and say, how can we use this? How can we get it? My job right now, today, is to let you know that this is a tool. It is available, and you can educate your staff, you can educate nursing facilities, assisted care facilities on end of life. So this is your foundation. While I'm still talking about staff, and maybe we'll get to questions at the end where we'll talk more about staff, but end of life care is different. End of life is outside of the medical model, and being outside of the medical model, we who work in end of life are kind of like salmon swimming upstream. You know, we're going against the current. And so we face a lot of challenges that other healthcare professionals are not facing. And so I put together a 25-minute DVD on taking care of yourself as a healthcare worker dealing with end of life, because we have different challenges than most healthcare workers have. Now, another whole workshop is dealing with the healthcare workers in the hospital setting now who are dealing with COVID-19. That's a whole nother area of how they can take care of themselves. But we who work in end of life, I have a little, 13, 14-page booklet called You Need Care Too. And the essence of that is for healthcare workers who work in end of life. That's all you guys, is that you have to learn to put your oxygen mask on first. And we as fix-it and caregiver personalities tend to take care of everyone else, and we're kind of at the bottom of the list. And so in this booklet, I've got guidelines on how to take care of yourself that is unique to our challenges. Talking about pre-grieving, you know, it was interesting. I got into end-of-life care work and into hospice because I thought, you know, I have a belief system in an afterlife, and I think I understand death and I can do this work. And so for the first year, I merrily went along my way taking care of patients, and death after death after death. And I was the co-facilitator of a grief workshop. So I'm there working at this grief workshop, and I'm the one that fell in a little heap on the floor. And I kept crying and saying, there's so many ghosts. And what I realized is that with each patient, with each family that we work with, we give them a little bit of ourselves, and we bring a little bit of them into our heart. And I just went from one death to another, and I didn't recognize the impact, the unconscious impact that those people had on my life. And I realized that I needed to develop some kind of closure to work with when I'm working with each family. For me, at that time, I went to every visitation. Went on my own dime, my own time, but I went and I said goodbye to the body. I went up to the coffin and put my hand on the body and said, thank you. Thank you for coming into my life, and I wish you well on your journey. And then I went to the family and I did the same thing. Thank you for coming into my life, and I wish you well on your journey. That was my closure. I'm not, particularly now, COVID-19 times, there aren't visitations, but and even in normal times, that may not work for you. But I suggest you find your ritual. Find your way of saying goodbye. And that may be having a log that you keep their name and the date of their death and a few sentences about that person. You may come home and light a candle and say a prayer and then blow the candle out. You do something to disconnect so that you can go on, and you've said goodbye and you move forward. And one more really important part of taking care of yourself is that we see a lot of unusual stuff. Sometimes it's scary, sometimes it's downright horrific, and we need to download. I used to come home and I'd say to my husband, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened today. And after a few times of that, he said, Barbara, you can't tell me this stuff. I can't deal with this stuff. And so I realized that I had to find someone who was a listener and who could carry what I had to unload with, what I had to download with. And so I recommend that all of us who are working in end of life have a buddy. Now, if you have your agency, I know that we say, oh, we've got the chaplain or the social worker. That's not enough. You need one person in your agency or outside I don't care where you find that one person, as long as that one person is a listener, knows they don't have to have answers, and that can be supportive. Someone that you can call and say, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what happened today. And then download it, because once you verbalize it, you get it out, and then you're not carrying it. Those are just two of the ideas that I have that are in the DVD of Taking Care of Yourself and the little $2 booklet of You Need Care Too. All right, let's move on. Now I've got my notes here, so I want to make sure that I haven't forgotten anything. So I'm looking down, and you can probably tell that. Okay. In this time of social distancing, of sheltering in place, I understand, because I would feel, if I were a family and I had a loved one at home, I would feel, I don't know that I really want you in hospice coming into my house. I don't know that I want you healthcare workers bringing in your germs. And so my tendency would be to keep you at a distance, literally on the other side of my front door. I'm not going to let you in. And I'm sure that you are dealing with that in a lot of situations. This makes our education of even more vital importance for our families. Being isolated with someone that they know is dying, who only has the role models of television and the movies, and all that fear of what it's going to be like, locked up in their house by themselves. We have to figure out, if we can't get in the door, how are we going to get in the house? And we rely on touch and hugs and eye contact. And all of a sudden we're forced to use a phone or to teleconference and say, look in my eyes, see how serious I am. We have obstacles that are really challenging. Under normal circumstances, we know that in our education, just sitting down with the family and talking to them and telling them what we want them to learn and know isn't enough. Communication is often a matter of, what are they really hearing me say? What did they understand of what I said? Oftentimes your family or a patient will sit there and you're talking and teaching them something, and they're nodding their head up and down, and really they don't have a clue. They're just being agreeable because they're so overwhelmed. So just verbally educating isn't enough. We have to back up. We have to teach in more ways than one, because people learn in more ways than just hearing or just reading. So we're going to combine it, and we're going to start these two books. Gone From My Sight. I'll bet you all of you have heard and know and hopefully use Gone From My Sight. So I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail, except that Gone From My Sight tells the family what is going to happen to their loved one who is dying over a period of months, weeks, days, and hours. So they can look at this book and they can go, oh, on page 8, yep, that's where Dad is. He's restless, he's breathing funny. All of these are outlined, which is a guide that says to the family, nothing pathological is happening. Dad is doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's doing a good job of getting out of his body. So every family member now needs this booklet. What most hospices have been doing before the pandemic is they put it in an initial family packet, and when they're going all the thousands, no, I'm exaggerating, when they go over the many papers that are in that initial packet, they may see this, they may not. They may read it, they may not. I recommended then, before the pandemic, that you make this part of your care plan. That when, as a team, you're coming up with the plan of care, you put in there, read with family, gone from my sight. And then when you have sat down with the family and you've read it, then you document, because if you don't document, it didn't happen, that you went over the booklet with the family and what their response was. That's the important part. What was their response? And think of the education that you were doing. Today, you don't have the luxury of sitting down in a family's living room and sitting side by side on the sofa and reading the book together. But what you can do is you drop it off at their doorstep. And if you can't do it, have one of your volunteers drop it off at the doorstep in the mailbox and say, we're delivering these 2 booklets to you. And your job is to read it, and then we're going to talk about it. And you either Zoom or you do it on the phone, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. But this is your teaching tool that can be in the house when you can't be. The other booklet, the 11th Hour, is the companion booklet. They go together. You put them both in the initial family packet under normal times, and you drop them both off on the doorstep in these times. Because where Gone From My Sight says, here's what's going to happen in the next months, weeks, days, or hours. Here's what you do while it's happening. When I was a hospice nurse, my goal was to be with the family at the moment of death. That was the goal. Last year, a research from NHPCO came out that said there had not been a skilled visit for 55% of the hospice patients in their home or in a facility in 2.5 weeks before the patient died. What in the world? At the most vulnerable, scary, challenging time, we're not there? Someone isn't there? That to me is just so unacceptable. And yet across the country, hospice services have evolved because of a lot of reasons, to where most family members are alone when their loved one dies. And so they don't know what to do. And that's why they need the 11th hour more than ever. That's why I wrote the 11th hour, was because families were being left alone at the most frightening time of the whole experience. Our goal as end-of-life workers is to help the family and the patient have a sacred experience, which leads to a sacred memory. And that sacredness will be overrun by fear if they don't have the support on what they can do. And even more so now that they're alone. Okay. Now, hospice is taking on more and more patients with dementia, and dementia doesn't play by the rules. You don't know if a person with dementia has entered the dying process until they can't eat, till they have swallowing difficulties, until they choke, till they start choking, till they get that food in their mouth and they can't remember to swallow or to chew. And the family decides not to do a feeding tube, then the person with dementia enters the dying process. But because hospice is taking on more patients with dementia, I wrote another booklet, same format as all my other materials, large print, 5th grade level, short, simple, direct, but gentle. And this deals with, for a caregiver, on dementia at end of life. It talks about making decisions on feeding tube. It talks about the long goodbye. It addresses all of those areas with dementia. What's happening when we don't educate our families on how people die from dementia is that we bring them on, and 6 months later, they have not deteriorated or changed downward significantly enough, and we take them off service. And then the family is devastated and they're angry with us because we haven't taught them enough so that they understand why they have to come off service. Okay, so dementia, what is it? How do I know you? I did a workshop for it was a podcast, a webinar. That's what I was looking for. I did a webinar for WellSky Chip, and it was on pain management at end of life. And pain management at end of life, just like all the rest of the care at end of life, is different than for someone who's going to get better. And with today's opioid crisis, with an overwhelming fear of narcotics, you wouldn't believe the number of emails that I get from family members saying, hospice killed my mom. Hospice, it was morphine. She was fine until they came. And then hospice put her on morphine, and 3 days later or 3 hours later, she was dead. It's their fault. And what that tells me is that we didn't do a good enough job in educating families on pain at end of life. So it was interesting that after that webinar that I did, I opened it up for questions, and I said, send me your questions. I'll put them in writing and I'll give them to Chip and he'll disperse them. This is all healthcare, and there must have been 30 some questions. And in reading over the questions, I realized how little these end of life healthcare professionals knew or understood pain management at end of life. So I wrote another booklet, short, simple, large print, pain at end of life, that simple. And the gist of it is dying is not painful. Disease causes pain. There are a lot of diseases out there that people die from that don't cause pain. And if a person's disease history is one of no pain, then just because they're dying doesn't mean we waltz in there and start giving them morphine. What we do is the person who has had no pain in their disease history, and they're now in the weeks to days before death, what their body feels like is not disease pain, but if we, and I use the word flu differently than COVID-19, but if you have the normal flu, you ache all over, and you don't take morphine for it. What you do is to take a couple of ibuprofen or a couple of Tylenol. Well, the person who's dying, who has not a history of pain in their disease, give them a couple of ibuprofen, take that edge of the ache all over off, but you don't have to get them the morphine. Now, there are a lot of diseases out there that cause pain. And if the disease history is one of pain, then you're going to medicate that person till their very last breath. And some of the dynamics on end-of-life pain is that you're probably going to have to increase what they were on in the months before death. You're going to have to, in the weeks before death, probably increase their medication because their body's shutting down, nothing's working right, the circulation isn't the way it normally is. And so to get the pain medicine throughout the body, you're going to have to give more. And what I say to families when they say hospice killed my mom because they made me give her the morphine and 3 hours later she was dead, or 3 minutes, 30 minutes, mom was dead. The thing is, that morphine is probably still sitting in her, probably even in her mouth. But if it was liquid, or anything you give by mouth, you can give by rectum, then it was probably still in the rectum because the circulation was shutting down and not working. And so it was not getting through to the heart and the lungs to make it stop. Didn't kill them. They died because of the disease. So pain at end of life, it talks about the difference and educates the family. So if pain is an issue, along with gone from my side, along with the 11th hour, you're going to give pain at end of life so that you've educated the family. I have another booklet that really most people don't even know about, and that is A Time to Live. And if you do palliative care, it's a great palliative care book because it's for the patient. All the rest of this is for the family, but this is for the patient from new diagnosis or as long as they have energy to read. My mother and stepfather in Omaha, by the way, were both diagnosed with cancer of the lung, and died within 5 months of each other. And in the 18 months from diagnosis to death, there was so much I wanted to say to them. And stepfather was, he was going to beat it. I didn't know anything. I was the nurse of death. Certainly didn't want to hear from me. So I applied kind of manipulatively, I have to admit, to his intellectual prowess and said, I've written a new book. Would you edit it for me? And he did. He never commented on the contents. My mother read it and we talked about it at length. But that's how it came to be. It is for a person who's been told, we can't fix you, and how to address the rest of their life and to help them see they've been given a gift. And that's a gift of time. And what are they going to do with that gift? So that's palliative care. Hospice gets our referrals too late, but palliative care. Then I'm looking at the clock. We're doing okay. All right. I hope you're thinking questions here. I used to, the first few years that Gone From My Sight was out there, I would get letters from families saying, Mom died 5 weeks ago, and I want 5 more Gone From My Sight to give to family. And I thought, wait a minute, they don't need Gone from My Sight. They need something on grief. So I wrote My Friend I Care. I have since learned that actually Gone from My Sight really helps with grief because it addresses actually on an unconscious level the guilt that a lot of people carry about how mom died. They think it was pathological, and they carry some of those mental pictures, those visual imageries of mom and what they did and didn't do. They carry that with them forever in their grieving process. And so understanding that mom did what she was supposed to do. Remind me to talk about a chicken, okay? But Gone affirms that mom did what she was supposed to do, that nothing bad happened. It was normal what she did. So anyway, to address that, I wrote My Friend I Care, which addresses normal grieving because we don't really understand grief. There's a lot of craziness to grief. And if we don't have a guide, then we think there's something wrong with us, when actually the anger, the depression, the physical symptoms, those are all part of normal grieving. And so how are you going to use this? This becomes your sympathy card. I purposely left this first front cover blank. And under normal circumstances, you'd pass it around at team meeting, you'd all sign it and send it to the family that first week after the death. That is your sympathy card. Today, you have someone at the office say from the team, and you put it in the mail the first week, and you send it, and it is your sympathy card, but you've given them something of substance. I knew if I told you to remind me about the chicken that I'd remember. It's when I don't say that. Okay. Labor, we go through labor to get into this world, and we go through labor to leave it. And the labor to leave this world is that. It's hard work. It's labor. We work hard to get out of our body. And it looks like pain. It looks like we're suffering when really we're like that little chick that works really hard, pecking, working to get out of its shell. Well, that's what we do when we're dying from disease or old age. In the weeks, 1 to 3 weeks before death, our labor begins. And what we are watching, we the watchers are looking at, is that little chick working to get out of its shell. And that labored breathing, the congestion, which is going to depend upon how hydrated or dehydrated the person is, all of that is the work that it takes for us to normally get out of our body. It's just that no one teaches us that. And that's what we in end of life, that's our job. That's why 90% of our work is education, because people don't have it. We, particularly Americans, are so death denying. And our medical model is that we fix everything. And if we can't fix it, then the medical model has failed. And so that's the mentality that most people are going to carry unless we, you and I, teach them otherwise. All right, how are we doing for time? We're doing pretty good. Are there questions out there? I want you to be thinking about questions because I'm getting close here. Let me check my notes. I get off on tangents, so I've got to see if I covered everything. Okay. I took my workshops, I think there's 4 of them in here, that I gave around the country, and I put them in book form. And again, I write 5th grade level, easy. I love stories and examples, no medical terminology, but it is how people die basically in book form. So it's you might find this interesting. It's great for volunteer training. And you can say, you know, we really don't have the money to give you one of these, but if you can spend $15, this would be really helpful. So this is a good teaching tool, as is This Is How People Die. I actually relate more to reading than I do listening, probably because I wear hearing aids, so hearing isn't my major function. It's always been impaired. So I read, but there are a lot of people. I have a daughter. She listens, so she does the ebooks because she likes to listen. All right, then this is my last material. And this is a 25-minute DVD called New Rules for End-of-Life Care. It puts in simple, short form what the 3-hour DVD has for professionals. New Rules for End-of-Life Care is your tool for educating families and the community. Now, again, we're not gathering, but you can via Vimeo or call my office and Joey will help you figure out how to help families watch this, 25 minutes, and then you can talk about it. It's the new rules for end-of-life care. I've done death cafes with it, community senior citizens groups. Hopefully someday we will be able to do those things again. Right now, you can use it individually or use it Vimeo. Okay, I didn't hear anything. Do we have questions?
I don't see any questions in our Q&A box now, so I'll encourage anyone, if you have a question or anything that you'd like Barbara to address, please put that in the Q&A box and we can get Barbara to speak on that topic. So while you all put a question in the box, I have a question for you, Barbara. What is the most common question that you've gotten recently related to hospice and palliative care and the pandemic?
That's a great question. I have a cat hair there. Okay. In my mouth, sorry. It's a great question. I think the biggest concern across the country is that we're not allowed inside the house. And because part of hospice is the love, the closeness, that's part of our support of you're not alone. And yet they are alone now, even with us. So we have to think outside the box. And so here's what I have suggested during this time of not being able to be up close and personal and face-to-face. Here's what I suggest, is that you start with, if you can't now, the other thing is, I told you all I'm technologically challenged. I'm old. I don't know how to do all this stuff. Bring in my 13-year-old grandson and he could do everything that I needed help with today. Most of us seniors are technologically challenged, so it's going to be hard for most of us seniors at home to use Zoom or webcam. So we're going to have to rely a lot on the phone and feel ourselves fortunate if they can Zoom. So because we're not able to be in the house and have eye to eye, we're going to need to provide more contact than we normally would. Fortunately, hospice gets paid by the day. Think of home health care agencies that get paid by the visit. They're having a whole unique set of challenges, but hospice gets paid by the day, not by the visit. So you're going to increase contact with that family. And when you start out, when you first bring them on, you're going to obviously assess where they are in the dying process. Are you looking at months? Generally, we're not. We generally get our referrals weeks before death, if we're lucky, and oftentimes it's days before death. So let's say that we're fortunate and you're looking at weeks. Remember, we cannot, oh, my nose itches. We cannot put a time, 6 months, 3 weeks. We can't put a number on how long someone has to live. The closest we can get is months, weeks, days, or hours. But let's say we're looking at weeks, that they have entered labor. They're in their home with their caregiver. So there's 2 of them in the house, basically sheltering in place. You're going to start by talking, hopefully on Zoom, but maybe on the phone, and you're going to address the elephant in the room. And you're going to say, these are strange, hard times. And for you and your dad or your husband or whoever to be there in your home alone, I know is really, really scary. So we're here for you. And because we can't come in, here's what we're going to do. I am going to call you every single day. There may be days that I call you twice. And I'm just going to check in. You know, every morning between 9 and 10, I'm going to call you on the phone. And you can tell me how the night went. You can tell me any new concerns. And we'll say and talk about whatever you want to talk about. And maybe it'll be, hey, everything's okay. And we'll hang up. Or maybe we'll talk a long time about what you're worried about. And then, depending upon how your day goes, if you think this person is days from death, you may call 2 or 3 times a day. You're going to be there in the form of contact, even though you can't touch them. That will be your touch. And I don't know the dynamics of each individual agency, whether you've laid people off or not, but you can also use your volunteers here in that we're assigning you Jane Smith. She's one of our volunteers, and she's going to call you every day. She's going to see how things are going every day for you. And then you also reassure her, even though we're having all this contact, you can call me anytime, day or night. Doesn't make any difference. And there will be times when you'll call at 8 o'clock at night and say, I'm checking in, seeing what's happening, because the goblins always come out at night. So I'm checking in. And that brings the reassurance. And fortunately, we're getting paid to do that, you know, so it doesn't have to be in the door. It would be wonderful if it was. Now, let's say the family has a loved one in a nursing facility and they can't get in the nursing facility. you're going to, a huge part. In fact, I think hospice's work is more with the family than it is the patient, because we get those patients so late in a referral. And so it's comfort management, symptom control, and that's basically it for the patient. You're not socially interacting. So patients in a nursing home, you've done the same thing. You've assigned a volunteer to that family to call. You've been calling. And here's a suggestion that I came up with for families that can't be at the bedside of their loved one when they're dying. Watched a man on television, and he was sobbing that his dad was in a nursing facility dying of COVID and they wouldn't let him in, and how he couldn't and wanted to be at the bedside. What I recommend, and there's a lot of people that are in that situation, is in your home alone. Dad's in a nursing facility dying. Sit down in your favorite recliner, close your eyes, and picture Dad in bed, peacefully asleep. And in your mind's eye, go to him, crawl in bed with him if you want, or hold him. Maybe you just want to hold his hand. But in your mind's eye, you're with him. And then you start talking to him. And you tell him everything you've ever wanted to say. All the good, all the challenges. You say it all. How much you love him, if it's true. How much you're going to miss him, if it's true. Say everything that your heart wants to say. And in your mind's eye, you sit there with him. At some point, you'll know it's okay to get up out of your chair. Thoughts are things. Rituals and symbols have real meaning to our minds. And when we can't be there physically, we can be there mentally and emotionally. So that's an offering that we can give to people who want to be there and can't.
Those are some great suggestions. Thank you. We have a couple more questions that popped
Great.
up. So the first one was, I was surprised by the stat of 55% of hospice patients not receiving a skilled visit in 2 weeks prior. Where can I find that?
It was last year, I believe. And if I were going into my office, I have it at my office, but I'm not allowed to go in there because I'm sheltering in place and we're trying to keep my husband and I safe. But try going to NHPCO. That's where I got the statistic. Try for 2019 statistics that they put out. And what, well, I'm looking for a pencil. I don't know. Well, I can't get to my office. That's frustrating, but I'll see if I can do a search, and if I can find where it is on the website, I will let Connie know and she can pass it on. But don't, if I can find it, you can find it probably better than I can. But that's where it came from. It was their annual statistics that they put out. Now, someone who talked to me about that said the operative word there was skilled visit, that may not have, it may have been addressing the nurse as the skilled visit, but didn't account for volunteers or social worker or chaplain. So that was one thought that was not outlined in the research project, or at least in the details that they gave me that I read. So, and if you find it and want to share, certainly contact me. You can, Barbara, bkbooks.com. I'm open for questions, contact, anything. Also, go to my Facebook End of Life and Bereavement group. We've got a big, wonderful group of people that we share and support on Facebook. And LinkedIn, find us there too.
I'll try to find it as you answer this next question that we have. So our next question is what your thoughts are on palliative sedation.
I see that as a last resort. If pain is absolutely uncontrollable and intolerable, yeah, use it. But you have to make sure that the family understands what you're doing, because otherwise they're going to say you killed her. You've got to make sure that they understand that for some people, the pain of their disease, not of dying, the pain of their disease is intolerable. Operative word, intolerable. And that the best we can do for them is to let them sleep through this. We never end someone's life. That is not our job. That is not what we're there for. That's not what we do. But we can keep people comfortable. And when nothing else works, we can help them sleep until their body stops breathing. But we're not going to overdose. And it's education. It's education. And I think, I'm going out on a limb here, but I think there's a lot of us in hospice who are caregivers, who are professional caregivers, who don't understand that dying is not painful. We interpret what we see as painful. And so it's up to the agency first to educate their staff on the normal, natural way people die so that they can educate their families. Did you find anything? I see you looking.
I think I may be close, but haven't found it yet. But our next question is, what do you think is the role of the social worker in educating the family?
Oh my gosh. Social workers are so underutilized. I should have been a social worker. I really should have. I say that a lot, that's really where my heart is. And dying is not a medical event. It is a social, communal event. And we need the skills of a social worker to guide and educate that family. And we don't utilize them because our medical model has taught us that dying is a medical event. That's the medical model. We have to remember that end of life is outside of the medical model. We operate outside of the medical model. And so we know everybody dies. You're born, you experience, you die. It's the name of the game. So there will come a point where everyone will die. And so it goes from trying to get someone better, which is medical, to recognizing that they have entered the dying process, that they can't be fixed. Now it's communal and social. And so we tend to underutilize our social workers to the detriment of the agency and to the detriment of the families. The same with chaplains. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here because people tend to associate chaplaincy with religion. And what they don't understand is that a chaplain is above religion, in that that chaplain does not carry a religious agenda, but a spiritual support, a personal support with them. And so again, it's up to us as an agency to educate our families that this isn't about religion. This chaplain visit is about support. And we want to support you in as many ways as we can. And that's not just the nurse. It's not just the home health aide that we want to come in and give a bath and change the bed for you, but we want the social work support and the chaplaincy support for you. And they can get on the phone and they can do the same thing, you know, and if you're talking weeks, then maybe the nurse calls one day and the social worker calls the next day. And as part of your team, figuring out how to provide support for this sheltering in place, you can alternate. You know, it doesn't have to be the nurse that calls every day. It can be, but you want at least one call a day from somebody.
Thank you. That is really helpful. So I have one update. I did find 2 documents. One was a release from NHPCO, a bunch of statistics. It was from 2018, but it was revised in 2019. So it came up as 2019. And then I also found an imminent management of imminent death and hospice care that on page on page 2 goes over skilled visits in the last days of life. So just FYI.
Oh, thank you for looking that up.
Yeah, well, I did a lot of research in college, so I'm good at researching.
Snap that right out. That's, is
So
that
we
written
have-
down in your job description?
So we have one question and then one comment. So any thoughts on providing education to facilities now with their preoccupation with COVID, especially when in-person are not allowed?
I don't think they're going to have the attention span for anything right on they being a nursing facility because they're drowning. And literally their patients are dying. It's in the news every day. They're front line for this tragedy. And it's becoming more and more apparent that nursing facilities is not the place you want to be. You know, if you've got someone in a nursing home, a family member, most people want to get them out if they can. So the nursing facilities are not going to be open to you waltzing in and saying, hey, we want to do an in-service and you can go to Vimeo and watch this. But you can call and say, we're here for you. We recognize that your staff is under immense stress and we want to support your staff. And maybe you get the nursing facilities as part of your, and I'm going to sound crass here, but as part of your marketing strategy, get the nursing, order a bunch of these you need care too, which addresses how to take care. Oh, that was my favorite song on my cell phone. Okay, sorry. That you get, 25 of these or whatever and give them to the nursing facility and say, we recognize that your staff is under a great stress and we want to help. So take these and give to your staff. And when you have time, we would love to come in, and we'll figure out social distancing, and we'll do an in-service for your staff on grief, on how to have lived through this. So you become their support simply by calling them on the phone and saying, we're here for you, and here's what we can do for you.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We have one comment for you. The comment is, I just want to thank Barbara. I really appreciated the analogy of the chick in the labor of dying. In all my years in hospice, I have not heard that.
It fits though, doesn't it? I mean, if you really think about it, it fits. And the thing is, families watch their loved one and they think something awful is happening. And so I'll tell them about the little chick, and it's like a light bulb goes on, and they, oh yeah, okay, they're trying to get out of their body. All right, I get it. We relate to stories and analogies where we don't relate to medical information. 5th grade level. It's where we want to be.
Well, I don't see any other questions, so I will just echo that last comment to thank you so much for being here and speaking to us today. We so appreciate all of your wisdom and guidance during this difficult time. So thank you, Barbara, for being here with us. And I also wanted to thank all of our attendees here today and all of your staff that are, on the front line of facing this difficult time, and all of the, added difficulties and stress due to the pandemic. Thank you for all that you're doing. We're here if you need anything. So thank you to everyone for being here today and taking out the time. So
Okay.
thank you. That's a
Bye.
wrap. Bye.